I've kind of thought quite hard about the amount of money I've spent on gear over a few, decades of this sort of stuff, and I feel like for me it's got to be in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's as someone who's got quite deep into the gear hole, done a lot of kind of just buying and selling, right? And not necessarily much of it new, but I think, when you start to look at these things and stick them in a spreadsheet, if you've ever had this kind of gear addiction stuff going on, I think you can find it's quite easy to spend an awful lot of money once you start to total up the amps, pedals, guitars and stuff like that. And I think, certainly for me, I think a lot of my time is spent kind of thinking about gear, particularly for me now that it's a job. However, I spend less kind of actual money on gear than ever now. So I kind of just wanted to do a video talking about the urge to buy gear, but also the urge that I think comes along with that, which can be to sell gear.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
I was just perusing, there's the fretboard forum in the UK, and a thread came up. I was kind of thinking about this concept already, because I was thinking about people who buy a lot of new gear, because personally I tend to be someone who buys off of eBay or Reverb. That's where the majority of my buying has been done, just used stuff. And at least when you buy a used piece of gear, typically you can sell it for about what you paid for it, and I think it's quite a... I think I've heard Keith from 5 Watt World talk about this, sort of think about it like a loan. Whatever you lose on that piece of gear, if you do lose some money, divide that by the time that you owned it, and that's kind of like your lease fee, right? And it's probably a lot less than actually renting a piece of gear. But why do we get obsessed with gear? I think this goes hand in hand with any hobby or any kind of career, or anything that you can get involved in, mostly. You think of someone like, Tom Bukovac, who's like the musician's musician, and even he's interested in buying and selling gear, and the vintage kind of bug got him, right? You think about Joe Bonamassa, as far as doing the actual thing, Joe Bonamassa is doing it. Here's a guy who's buying and selling gear all the time. I think it's kind of something that comes along for the journey for a lot of people. It doesn't even have to be that you need a lot of money to do this. And in fact, for me personally, lockdown was the period where I went really silly with this, buying quite a lot of amps. And obviously during lockdown, I was using amps less than ever. And if you watch this channel at all, you already know that amps are not really a thing that I use a lot of. Now, one of the good things about this is that I think you can sort of supplant the urge to buy gear with a bit of a separate urge to sell gear, and maybe all it needs is some sort of little bit of a twist of how you're thinking about this stuff. And for me, what that meant was kind of thinking about space as being the thing that I needed more than gear. But also, if you think about money that could be used to pay off a mortgage or something like that, and that's been the other key motivator for me, where it's well, I could have a bit more space if I sold some of this gear that I'm maybe not using, don't need anymore, but also I can use that money to pay off my mortgage, or make an overpayment on the mortgage is actually what I do, not pay off the whole thing. But you know what I mean, you can overpay a little bit each month. And that's been a really kind of good motivation for me. And I honestly haven't really missed any of the gear that I've sold over the years doing this. What it can also do is kind of free up a bit of money for you to explore other ideas. And it's really easy, I find, to get back into kind of that mode of like searching through eBay. That's what I want to try and avoid, where it's like time spent just searching through, looking for the latest Dumble clone, or you know, a 2-rock that I know that if I was to buy a 2-rock I'd feel immediately guilty about the amount of money that I've got tied up in that amp, and I'd probably have to sell it again. I guess one other thing you could do to supplant this is to invest in some kind of learning stuff, and TrueFire might be a really good place to do that. Some of my favourite players are on there. You could use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of any individual course. But I think about something like that where you can get like an idea for something that's worthwhile practicing. Instead of 10, 15, 20 minutes scrolling eBay, you could spend it working on something. And there's one specific exercise Carter Arrington has, which is involving playing a downbeat on the 1, improvising and coming back to that 1, and it's surprisingly addictive. Maybe that's what I'll do a bit of at the end here, but it's just kind of, yeah, trying to think about those motivating factors for buying and selling gear. Like, we're often buying gear because we're spending a lot of time watching videos about gear or on eBay. A lot of the times it's not for stuff that we actually need per se, and instead I can supplant that with a bit of energy to sell gear. If I think about I'd rather have some space, make an overpayment on the mortgage, that's another kind of thing that for me works really nicely. And then thirdly, maybe just play your guitar instead. It's like another thing that I need to try and remember when I'm kind of looking through Dumble clones again, that, you know, just a little bit of stuff to think about there for me personally. And I do really get quite a lot of joy out of looking at through a spreadsheet of stuff that I used to own, that I no longer own, that I was able to, you know, help pay off the house with, or start paying off the house. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are there bits of gear that you regret selling? Is there anything you regret? Let me know your thoughts on that. Cheers for stopping by.